medieval world also thrived on odd, brutal, and often bizarre forms of amusement. From games of chance and laughter to spectacles of violence and fire, medieval festivals and leisure reveal a side of history at once fascinating and unsettling. Laughter often echoed from games like Blind Man's Bluff. This pastime required one person to be blindfolded and attempt to tag the others, stumbling through furniture and revellers. Unlike the refined dances or poetry contests, this was a game of physical comedy, where nobles of all ages joined in. It was considered a test of agility and wit. The blindfolded players' clumsy attempts became a source of merriment for the gathered court, and it often broke the formality of feasts, bringing even lords and ladies down to the same level of play. Across towns and villages, people gathered for animal baiting, a violent spectacle where chained bears, bulls, or packs of dogs were set upon for public amusement. Entire arenas were constructed for this purpose, and betting was common. The brutality was not hidden, it was celebrated. For medieval crowds, violence was not taboo but thrilling, a raw expression of power and survival. These events reinforced the medieval fascination with dominance over nature, and disturbingly, the suffering of animals was part of the attraction. In certain European regions, dancing on stilts became a favourite pastime, particularly during festivals. Participants strapped long wooden stilts to their legs and tried to dance to music, keeping balance as villagers cheered them on. Among the strangest medieval amusements was the brutal practice of goose pulling. A live goose, its neck greased, was hung upside down from a rope stretched across a road. Mounted riders would charge beneath, attempting to tear its head off in one swift motion. What shocks us today was, in its time, a festive contest tied to holidays or weddings. The difficulty of pulling the greased bird made it a challenging game, but the cruelty was part of the thrill. By the Renaissance, goose pulling had spread widely through Europe, even making its way to the Americas. Medieval entertainers were skilled in the dramatic, and fire breathing was among the most spectacular tricks. Using alcohol or rags soaked in pitch, performers would spit great bursts of flame into the air. For villagers who lived without fireworks or pyrotechnics, such displays seemed almost magical. These performers often travelled in troops, combining juggling, storytelling, and daring fire acts. Fire not only amazed the crowd, but also symbolised danger controlled, an impressive feat in a world where open flame was both essential and feared. Not every medieval fight was fought with swords. During harvest festivals, villagers sometimes staged mock battles using vegetables as weapons. Armies of peasants, armed with cabbages, turnips and apples, would hurl their produce at one another in chaotic melees. Ale was central to medieval life, and drinking contests were a common feature of taverns and festivals. Participants tested their capacity for alcohol, with crowds egging them on. The loser, however, often faced public humiliation, sometimes being dumped into a pond or barrel of water. These contests were more than drunken silliness. They reinforced bonds within the community, but also reminded everyone of the dangers of excess. In fact, chroniclers of the time often warned of the rowdiness that could spill over into violence after such competitions. It may be grim to modern sensibilities, but public executions were considered major spectacles. Markets filled with townsfolk eager to see justice carried out. Executioners became performers in their own right, sometimes prolonging the act for drama. Instead of jesters with monkeys and parrots, some medieval villages held quirky animal-based contests, such as frog-leaping races. Frogs were gathered and placed on the ground, and children, and sometimes adults, would cheer them on, trying to coax their frog across a finish line. Finally, hobby horse racing delighted both children and adults. Riders straddled wooden horse frames or fabric-covered poles, galloping in exaggerated fashion, while crowds laughed and cheered. This game reflected the medieval fascination with knights and cavalry, but transformed the seriousness of warfare into playful parody. Hobby horse games continued into later centuries, influencing folk festivals that survive to this day.